mention that. Recording in progress, right? The reason I make a song and dance about how the outdoors affects us in different ways is that there's a real thirst, perhaps amongst academics and others, to try and explain things, to come up with fantastic theories and models about why, say, for example, outdoor learning works. But actually, the whole outdoor space is a huge tradition of storytelling and narration around people's experiences. And of course, that's almost the nub of it. We experience our context in unique and individual ways. So for us, when we create an outdoor experience for our business leaders and teams, we are not, in a sense, specifying we're going to go out here and we're going to stuff some metaphors down your neck and you're going to come out the far end of this process with the answer to your business. No, we create a learning space with lots of different stimuli, which individuals will react to in their own personal ways, but it will ultimately shift the way they think and the way they frame a conversation to a slightly different space. So in a sense, we are almost sort of gestaltist in that sense. And to give you an example, we have a leadership track that we've taken our clients on for several years, and it's from Bridge of Orchy to Fort William. So you may know that as at the top end of the West Highland Way. Now, fantastic landscape, all sorts of weather, and we've got open spaces, we've got closed spaces, and we promote convergent thinking, and we promote divergent thinking, depending on the conversation or the coaching that we're doing at that time of the day. And we'll use slopes and vista points and descents, all in the service of supporting those conversations. Now, overlaid on top of that is we'll stop at a cairn where there may be an ancient story, and we'll tell the story of the place, which again, some people will respond to the story in a way that they're not responding to the landscape. And we'll bring along guest companions who maybe have a connection to the land. Maybe a business is run on the land, and we'll hear that person's story, and they'll walk for an hour or two with our clients and sharing the story, and then move off again. So it's like a guest companion. And then we'll put masterclasses on top of that. We'll bring in guest speakers. So we are creating a learning space with multiple sources of learning stimuli in a sort of almost unorganized and hopeful way. We're just creating a smorgasbord of opportunities for people to engage with each other in a different way, to have the conversations that they've never had before. So I'm offering almost a sort of unscientific and chaotic version of outdoor learning. But the thing that makes it unchaotic and structured is that we always start with the customer's purpose. What are the outcomes you wish to achieve from our time together in this place with these people and this process of inquiry? And that's where the structure comes. So that, in a sense, is kind of our proposition. Maybe give you one more example. We often work with a mountain rescue team in the sport of leadership teams who maybe come together for the first time, maybe through a merger and acquisition, and they need to get to know each other really quickly, work out what the collective leadership manifesto is, so they can go back into workplace and start delivering for their stakeholders. And we will use the drama of mountain rescue and rescuing and caring for casualties as a vehicle for this intervention. And just to sort of top and tail this quite quickly, is that the process of inquiry will often end up with a triage situation where the team comes across a couple of people, one of whom may well die and one will hopefully survive. And they have to, tussle at an ethical level with who are we going to save? Can we save both? Or, how do we do this? And the final part of the inquiry question is really around, as you stand here on this hillside with the wind caressing your cheek and the threat of rain coming over the hill, and you have these people at your feet who you are entrusted with to care. And at this point, it gets deeply experiential. Everybody by this stage may have lost someone in their lives, And this outdoor scenario is reaching into something almost primeval, and it becomes a moment of high drama. And we invite them to step one by one towards the ailing casualty and write down on perhaps their high-vis vest all the processes and behaviors they're going to leave behind. And then on the person who's hopefully going to live, they write down on the high-vis vest all their promises for the future. So it becomes the team charter. And with this sort of mountain rescue scenario, it's a choice around resources and what you're going to do, what you're not going to do. And that sort of high drama moment involving lots of ethics and all sorts of complex things in people's heads becomes, in NLP terms, if I can use that, a moment of deep grounding or anchoring. So one of the things we do in our outdoor learning is we always aim to create unforgettable moments, so that the moments of insight don't evaporate when they go back to the workplace. And if I can just give you one example, we worked with a bank, and we checked in with them a year later, just well, how are things going? And they said, every time we need to have a courageous conversation, we say to whoever it is, Joan, we need to have a Dunblane moment. And the reference to Dunblane was a place that we used for an intervention for this bank. And that shorthand just calls up the memory and of those moments where they had a breakthrough and could use that shorthand to engage in, their terms, a courageous conversation. So even after they have left the place still has value and power in their conversations going forward. So that's a sort of a story about a story, and obviously open to questions now or later on. Matt.
Thanks very much, Dave. That's so you put that in, so clearly. That's perfect. I'm really glad that I put you at the front there, because that really sort of sets the context. And I think we'll do some questions a bit later if that's okay with everyone. But basically, what I want to do now is try and explain how does that translate into higher education and what my goals are as a teacher. In terms of practice. So I'm just going to share my screen here. Okay, so I'd like to move on to this sort of case study. Oh, I just need to check if everyone can see that okay, if I could just get a thumbs up or something. Yeah, thank you. I'm always nervous about Zoom. It always lets me down some sneaky way. This is a case study about a course, a service risk and resilience course, and I'm kind of aware that Josephine has joined us and is an expert on risk, so I just probably want to make the point that I'm not. But I was called in to help with this course. I'll tell you a little bit more about it later. Basically because I have a background in the military too, and well, apart from the fact that always involves risk evaluation, I did have some formal roles running risk registers and so on. So as I said, I do have this background in the military, but unlike Dave, I spent about 7 years in submarines, and then I spent about 20 years as a mine clearance diver. So I was basically always on top of or underneath the sea in some way. And I think this is like basically the wrong sort of outdoors. It's not a very accessible environment to use for teaching. And when I left the Navy in 2018, I'm a second career academic. I've only been at this for about 3 years now. But when I left the Navy in 2018, I set up my own business as a leadership development consultant. And I was working with businesses in a similar way to Dave's just explained there, sort of different pitch really, but I was very keen on the kind of outdoors element. I got to meet Dave via various sort of networking events that happen across Scotland for small businesses, and I thought, wow, I would really like to do that. But what I realized very, very quickly is that I don't have the expertise or the experience to do anything like that. And I think now that I've run that business for a little while, and it sort of overlapped a little bit with my academic career, but I've now wound that down, and I'm now basically teaching. And the experience that I have as an academic, and also I note the experience of my colleagues as well, is also kind of nothing like that either. So I think that outdoor environment as a teaching environment is very different for most of us. I'm sure there are some exceptions to that, but it's a how do we plumb into that in higher education? How do we sort of access that? So when I was brought into the risk and resilience course, I felt like here is an opportunity to go and do something around that, drawing on Dave's experience and doing it as a collaboration. So the risk and resilience course is part of an MSc, which is in tourism studies, and it's based at Dumfries at the Crichton campus. And we usually have, it's very, very small. We only usually have kind of about a dozen PGT students, and it's an elective for them. So basically they can choose that course or they can choose some other course on their journey. Sorry, postgraduate taught students. So just to explain my abbreviation there. So we don't really know how many we're going to get because it's an elective. We don't know until the last minute how many, but quite a small and manageable number. So I felt like maybe this was an opportunity because I also teach a level 1 undergraduate course, and I've got up to 400 students on there. And I thought, you know, if it comes down to me taking 400 students outdoors, then I can't really guarantee they're all going to be coming back. So I thought with a dozen students, this seems like a lot more manageable. I also felt that the risk course had a real connection to purpose, and Dave was talking about purpose just before. And I think that although I've been really interested in doing outdoor learning, I do realize I can't just do it for the sake of doing it. It's really nice to kind of go outdoors and have a memorable kind of day on a hill or something, but we do obviously have to connect this to some sort of teaching objective at the end of the day. Now, risk assessment, it seems to me, is perfect from this point of view. And as we'll be finding out in this case study, we also link it to tourism studies as well. But risk assessment is a practical activity at the end of the day, and it can get very, very complex. So we start off with basic sort of consequence versus likelihood types of decisions and quite simple graphics to explain where a risk is. But it goes on to some quite quantitative sort of techniques that can't really be practiced outdoors, but the foundation is in these very simple consequence versus likelihood type calculations, which can be done outdoors, and therefore that can form a kind of scaffold for the more advanced learning that they have to do in risk as well. And also the intended learning objectives of the course was to actually conduct some risk assessment. So we kind of give them an outdoors place to go and do that. So it sort of connects very well with purpose, and that's why I felt it was a good opportunity to do it. Also, excuse this is a drawing I did last year about how I felt about Zoom at the time. Sorry if this is a bit dark, but you know, I think there is this sort of death by PowerPoint issue, which I think preceded COVID really, is that, you know, we teach indoors and we can get stuck in certain ways of teaching. And of course, I don't think Zoom has really helped. So I do feel like, having said all that stuff about purpose, I do think it is good to get out of the lecture theatre or out of the classroom and just go and do something outdoors. So this is Cleverock Castle. I should have pointed out that my graphics that I used for this slide is just because I liked it. It's not Cleverock Castle that I used in the earlier slides. This picture actually is. So Cleverock Castle it's about 15 minutes drive from the Dumfries campus. If you're interested in these sort of things, it's the only triangular medieval castle in Scotland. But I chose it because it's a tourism site, it's near the campus, and also Historic Scotland actually have like an educational kind of agenda as well. And when I spoke to Cleverock Castle, they were very interested in Historic Scotland. They were very interested in this. We had no problem getting education passes for the students to go to Cleverock Castle. And also the the real estate around the castle offers multiple kind of outdoor areas and different features that the students can go and explore. So, you know, straight away you're doing something that you cannot do in a lecture theatre, because you're exploring very, very complex three-dimensional kind of environments there. I should say we planned this originally in 2020. We were going to go and do it in March 2020, and that got cancelled due to COVID. It was literally like, I think it was the day before we were actually going to do it. I think Dave might even have driven down to Dumfries or was on his way down to Dumfries when I was told, sorry, no field trips, and we had to sort of call it off. And we're planning to do it again this year on the 11th of February. So we haven't actually quite got around to doing this yet. In terms of logistics, it was quite simple, I thought, because it's quite near to the Dumfries campus. So we had to organize some transport. That turned out to be really easy. I spoke to our finance people at the business school, and we got that sorted out in no time. It's a 15-minute hop to Kelleverott Castle and 15 minutes back again. Obviously, we have to be aware of COVID restrictions. So we have to, and I think this comes under the general banner of risk assessment anyway. There's a certain amount of preparation. There are things we need the students to do. We do need them to not turn up in shorts and flip-flops. You know, so we do need them to do LFTs. And well, I guess I don't think it's controversial to say that, you know, with students, as with any kind of mass outing, you can't assume that they'll just know that. You have to tell them basically everything, timings and so on. So there's a lot of thought that goes into it. Dave's done 2 recce's now, I think, haven't you? Down at the castle. So Dave's been down anyway and had a look at it. I haven't actually been on site. I've spoken to them, but Dave's been around to sort of confirm that it's a good learning environment and that we can achieve our objectives, and B, that it's, you know, it's safe to do so and we can manage that group. So I think that's an interesting kind of something that I learned, because when I first thought about doing this and doing a collaboration, I was thinking that Dave's company could basically provide the kind of safe envelope to go and do something. What I realized very quickly is that Dave actually knows how to use this environment, which I don't. So that's suddenly become like the most important thing, but the safety thing is obviously important as well. So we're drawing on Dave's expertise as well as that kind of safety envelope. And I also want to point out there are university guidelines around field trips as well. So it is worth looking at those. But essentially what it comes down to is that you need to have a good risk assessment. Dave's done the risk assessment for us, and I guess it's a bit of luck that the course leader is also a risk specialist, and I have experience in risk as well, so we can look at that risk assessment and know what that's about. So what I would say is that if you're not aware of how risk assessments work and what their role is and so on, it's probably worth getting someone to take a look at that from an educational point of view when you've sort of essentially outsourced that risk assessment. You still need some sort of expertise, I think, to understand. Maybe expertise is the wrong word, but familiarity in order to understand it. So in terms of the plan, this is just a map, ordnance survey map of the castle itself. Don't really need to know this other than the plan is basically we're going to pick up the students on the 11th of February, drive them to the castle, and we're going to drop them off in 3 locations, and they will all have a scenario. So they'll sort of operate within a kind of story, if you like, and they'll be given a mission, like go and find out about this, that, and the other. Or they might be preparing for a certain event at Kelleverott Castle, and they're the party that's going to go and do a risk assessment prior to planning whatever this event might be, this educational event or this tourism event. So they kind of disperse, but so there are 3 places where they can go. So we can really make use of all those different locations, because of course they're going to talk to each other as well. So they'll be able to share experiences from all these different locations. But I do want to point out, we don't just like drop them in the castle and then come and pick them up a couple of hours later and hope that they're all still there. Dave and I will be around to sort of make sure that everything goes okay. They're only actually at the castle for an hour and a half, which I think in February is probably fine. And it allows them to go and do what they need to do without getting too exposed to the elements, because we don't really know what that weather's going to be like. So we're going to do all the briefing and debriefing back on campus, and we've basically booked a room with IT where the students can then have a bit of lunch and then reflect on what's happened and come up with their risk assessments. They've come up with a great idea of them describing the risk assessments that they've done by using storytelling. So they're going to use, basically they're going to sort of create a story of perhaps a tourist that visits the castle and what happens to that tourist and what sort of risks they encounter along the way, as a way of sort of, again, scaffolding that risk assessment process. Because as I said before, risk assessment can get very complex. It can be, we can do dynamic risk assessments on the spot, which are pretty simple, right the way over to what they call the HAZOP type of procedure, which is much more quantitative. So we're sort of scaffolding this a little bit for them by giving them a storytelling approach. And we might also do the consequence likelihood type scenario. So then what's going to happen then is they're going to brief Dave and I at the end what those risks are. And we're going to provide what we used to call in the military environment, the red team type of approach, which is the sort of something that's very familiar to us as academics, which is to critique what they're telling us and provide challenges and feedback. So I'll just kind of wrap it up there. So we've got time for questions. I just wanted to make this point that we haven't got as far as actually doing this just yet. So I haven't got any student experience to feed into this. However, what I will say is that in March 2020, we had to cancel that trip at short notice, as I mentioned before. And the students were universally really disappointed about that. And every single student put something about the field trip in their course evaluation in a positive way. You know, they said they didn't say they enjoyed the field trip because they didn't go, but they really liked the fact that we planned it and they were looking forward to it. So even without doing it, we're starting to get some positive feedback. Now, maybe if we had done it, maybe it'd be different. I don't know, but you know, I think that the students kind of, what I took from that really is that they understood what we were trying to achieve. So I think as long as we can work with the students, we could turn this into a very positive and kind of memorable event for them. And as I said before, I haven't done any scholarship around this or an inquiry about this. So I'm not looking at it in a very scientific way right now. I'm looking at it in an exploratory kind of pilot way. But I do hope that if this is successful, we can build on this. And I hope that, you know, if any of you are interested in kind of doing something in the future around outdoor learning, I don't know who else is doing outdoor learning on the university, but it can't be very many, I wouldn't have thought. So I'd like to sort of try and build some expertise around this. And next academic year, semester 1, I've got my 400 students, but they're also in tutorial groups, which are obviously smaller. And I'm really hoping I can do something outdoors with them next year. So we're gonna kind of keep building it. And that was really it from me. I'm just going to take a quick look at the chat, but I think generally we could open it up for questions. Oh, thank you for the comments about the artwork. That's very, very kind. And Dave's posted a link about why outdoors. But yeah, just to say, if there are, I'll just stop the share. If we've got any other questions, our time is our own from here. Hi, Vicky.
Hiya, yeah, I've got a comment. So this really appeals to me on 2 levels. And